of all, from an invisible illness perspective, and like people think you're a unicorn when you win Miss America and they don't think you have anything wrong with you, but that's like so untrue, and that's the whole issue with EDS.
It has been the craziest and most insane ride for me because I am not their normal Miss Wheelchair.
Nice to meet you virtually. Oh my gosh, I've heard, that you got to do this project, and I've, have so many people that know you and have met you. And so I feel like I know you, but we haven't gotten the chance to really meet, and I wish I could. So hello, virtually. Ryan, I think it's really interesting that we both have Ehlers Danlos syndrome. I know that I was diagnosed when I was 11, and I have Ehlers Danlos syndrome classical type 2. So I'm curious to know, you have a very different kind of Ehlers Danlos syndrome, I think, than I do. So I'd love to know what yours is, because I think that it kind of manifests a little differently for you than it does for me.
Yeah, I was diagnosed when I was 16-ish. And originally we thought it was just hypermobility type. Back then, the genetic testing was so expensive. And because it wasn't life-threatening or anything at the time, I was like, we'll do without it. Back then I didn't do the genetic testing, but when I eventually did it, I think I was like 23 or so, they found out not only do I have like classical-like Ehlers Danlos, I also have all these Marfan's genes as well. And so that's why it manifests in me, like mostly in my muscles and ligaments. How did you get diagnosed?
It was interesting. It was kind of an accident. So I had a routine scoliosis screen when I was in, I think, 5th or 6th grade. They were like, we think you have scoliosis. And so I went to an orthopedic surgeon to just monitor my scoliosis. Almost every woman in my family has scoliosis, so it was not surprising. And he immediately did an exam, and he was like, there's something else happening. He's like, there's something else that's going on with you that probably is causing this. And he did some manipulation of my joints and took some measurements of hypermobility, and he was like, I think you have Ehlers Danlos syndrome. I'm going to send you to a geneticist. And similar to your experience, there wasn't genetic testing.
What EDS does is it's a genetic collagen deficiency. My muscles, skin, organs, all that is way too stretchy. So it will get worse as I age, but because it's so rare, there's not a ton of research on exactly how it'll affect me. Nobody can really tell me, and all of the EDS patients kind of look differently because there's just not enough research yet. A big risk of death with patients with EDS is aortic aneurysms, because our vessels are all too stretchy. So they'll balloon and they can burst and cause immediate cardiac death if not monitored. So I have what's called an echocardiogram just to check out all my vessels in my chest every year to 3 years, depending on how everything looks. Just kind of monitor my disease process as best we can with the specialists that I have around here that are great and willing to research and learn with me, because I'm the only EDS patient for miles.
I am starting to get to the point where certain pieces of my mobility or certain areas of my joints just struggle. The other thing that's weird, an organ thing that's affected for me, is my eyes. And so I have to constantly be checked to make sure that, I think it's my retina is not detaching. And you can actually see a blue ring around the color of my eye, which is caused by the connective tissue that's a little bit different. I have to sit more than others. You would think as a 25-year-old girl that I would have all this energy and all this stamina and want to go out and do all these things. And I'm like, please, I need to sit down. I need a bottle of water. And I'm like, I'm sorry. And then people are confused because they're like, don't you work out? And I'm like, I do work out, but it exhausts me. And I need to work out because if my muscles aren't strong, then I'm going to fall apart.
Yep. Oh, I get that all the time. You lift weights. You're so healthy. You do Spartan races. I say, yeah, I do them differently. And then after I do them, I'm dead for a week and a half and I have to stay in bed. But it's quality of life.
I will say I was pretty apprehensive going into Miss America, hoping that I would have the stamina to be able to do the job, because that's my biggest implication from Ehlers Danlos. I do have pain, but my stamina is probably the worst part of it. I'm always so tired. And of course you can't be like that if you're Miss America, because you have to be on and ready to do things. When I won Miss America, I had to kind of like sit down and talk with them about like what I needed.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting because with Ehlers Danlos, it's not like there's a lot that you can do to treat it other than just like making sure that you're living a generally healthy life. But for me, like my blood pressure is kind of irregular, and so I need lots of water to make sure that like I have enough blood volume.
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm like, I just need to like sit down and take a break. Like if I'm standing too long, I literally will pass out and I will get tired and I just need like a minute. I have to like modify my lifestyle and the way that I do things to be able to be successful. But I've just gotten to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna have time to do other things. I'm just gonna have to make sure that I take care of myself. I struggle with brain fog a lot, so I have to make sure that I have eaten enough, that I have enough caffeine in me, because I love caffeine. And even like when I travel as Miss America, I'm like, okay, when am I gonna be able to take a break? When and where can I get food? When and where can I get water?
I had just been crowned and I had knee braces on for a shoot, and it was under a large skirt. And so I was standing, my chair was right out of reach, but you can't see that in the frame. And so I got a lot of hate because they said, you know, you're Miss Wheelchair Virginia, but you're standing. I said, have you ever seen a person who's paralyzed put on leg braces and stand and walk with a walker? Like they can do it just as well as I can. I'm not walking around here. You know, it's not. So they ended up actually changing that rule.
Wow.
They had never had any ambulatory wheelchair users go out for that title just because they hadn't. I was the only manual chair user that competed for Virginia. Everyone else was in a very large power chair. And I had been crowned, and then it was not even 30 seconds after I had that crown on my head, I was like leaving to go like see my family, and this woman stopped me and said, "This is a disgrace. You're not disabled enough to wear that crown." And that was like the very first thing that happened to me as Miss Wheelchair Virginia.
I really resonated with the fact that you said that people thought you were faking being in a wheelchair, because I think that people with Ehlers Danlos are constantly told that they're faking. It's like, you look fine. And I talk about like, I'm Miss America, right? I go around and I do things and I'm like, I have a physical disability. And people are like, you're fine. You really don't have anything going on. And I'm like, no, you don't understand the way that, you know, I have chronic pain. Like I walk and my ankles dislocate, or like my hip will dislocate, and it's painful. And you know, it's a struggle to go through this, especially as a title holder, and trying to be that representation and be that role model, but also humanize the fact that you never really know what's going on with people. So I know you have a title right now, so tell me about that and how you're able to advocate for the disability community through that.
I never expected in a million years to win. I was just like, oh, okay, this is insane. But it's been really validating for that imposter syndrome that I feel like a lot of EDS patients have, where you're like, yeah, okay, well, maybe I don't need this wheelchair. When I first started going around to events, I didn't really talk about my story as much. I more talked about the generalization of people with disabilities, and this is what we need to advocate for.
And I was an ER nurse through my entire career until I needed my wheelchair.
Just because I'm in a wheelchair, it's not like my nursing knowledge has gone out the window. I'm still a nurse. I've been practicing for years. Like, you give me a chance. And it's so crazy because it's really hard to get even in the door, because now we live in the day and age of Facebook, and you know, people can look me up in 2 seconds and see that I'm in Miss Wheelchair Virginia, and so that I don't get called back. You know, we work so well as patient advocates because we've been patients. My patients, it's so funny, when I roll into their rooms, they're like, you are the first person that has come in here and looked me in the eye on my level and talked to me like a normal human, instead of just these people in white coats, you know. So I've gone around kind of educating medical practitioners about disabilities and about how to work with people like that.
For me, I think one of the things that I have gotten to talk about a lot is invisible illnesses, because I fall into the category of really the invisible illness because I'm not in the chair. I don't have those obvious physical pieces. And people don't fully understand invisible illnesses and how that can affect you so much without it actually being seen. And then I tie that also into mental health, because I feel like that's a perfect example of another invisible illness that so many people struggle with. And so throughout this time, I think it's made me more empathetic toward people that I meet, because when I come across somebody and I meet them for the first time, I don't know what they're really going through, because I don't know that they don't have the same problem that I do. And I've met so many other people that do have Ehlers Danlos, which is really cool because it is a rare disease, right? But I think that it's so much more common than what we really do expect. And there's data to show that. But it's, brought me closer to other women in the pageant world that also have Ehlers Danlos.
My craniocervical, everything is just unstable. And so I have chronic migraines from that. And every time you go to a new specialist, it's like, all right, let me read you the riot act that is my ridiculous medical history. But you're right. They look at you and they're like, you're only 28 and you've had all this stuff done. I'm like, yup. They're like, oh, you're so inspirational. I'm like, I didn't have a choice.
I didn't choose any of this.
No, this is just my life. Thanks. I'm glad you think I'm inspiring, but I'm really just here living.
Also, just to talk to people about hey, you know what? I'm Miss America, but I'm a human too, and I have a problem, and I am not perfect, and that I struggle too. And just what people think of when they think of Miss America, which is kind of a shame. People assume that I'm this perfect person, and that nothing has ever happened, and I'm this. I always say that people assume that I'm a unicorn, and I'm like, I'm not. I'm literally a human being, and sometimes I struggle. And sometimes I get up in the morning and I have to go to an event and I'm not on because my body hurts, or I'm cognitively impaired because I'm tired. I think that it's so important that you and I are people that talk about this in a very different way. And we kind of, again, humanize this, because people think of, disabilities or these particular problems, and they have a certain picture of what that looks like in their head. Maybe that's somebody in a wheelchair. Maybe that's somebody who needs constant assistance, or someone that has to be in an assisted living facility. But that's not, for most people who live with certain disabilities, that's not the reality for us.
It's always just fascinating just how much, we have to self-advocate, because we do have these rare illnesses that, everyone's just like, well, I don't know what to do with you.
It's kind of that stigma, I think, that comes along with it. So I think that it's important work that we get to do together too.
Definitely. Yeah, no, this has been such an incredible opportunity just to educate, because so many people don't know that EDS exists.
Hopefully, maybe when I come back to Virginia, we can do something together too.
Yeah, that would be awesome.